In today's world, the Women's Honor Doctrine stands as a crucial shield for victims of sexual harassment and abuse, giving women the credibility and courage needed to testify against their abusers. However, recent moves to set aside this doctrine risk silencing victims, creating a more unjust system that erodes women's rights and security. If ignored, this shift would not only violate women's fundamental rights but also weaken key protections provided by laws like the Magna Carta for Women and Republic Act 8353, the anti-rape law. Join us in standing up for justice, because silencing voices only fuels violence. Let's protect the rights that empower and support.
The Women's Honor Doctrine has long been embedded in many cultures and legal systems, used to enforce specific gender roles, social expectations, and the regulation of women's behavior. This doctrine often places the responsibility for maintaining family or societal honor on women, linking their reputation to the actions of male relatives, such as fathers, brothers, or husbands. As a result, it has reinforced rigid gender norms and contributed to social control and discrimination. When this doctrine is reformed or discarded, the effects on women can be complex and context-dependent. However, some general outcomes include a reduction in gender-based violence, as the doctrine has often been used to justify violence against women, including honor killings, domestic abuse, and social exclusion for behaviors considered dishonorable, such as premarital sex. Abolishing the doctrine can decrease legal and societal justifications for such violence, while also providing women with greater agency to make their own decisions about relationships, careers, and personal expression, thus fostering greater equality and autonomy. Rejecting the concept of women's honor can lead to more equal legal treatment, as women are no longer held to different moral or behavioral standards than men. This shift can prompt reforms in laws related to marriage, divorce, inheritance, and sexual violence, giving women more control over their lives. Additionally, removing the focus on women's honor can contribute to broader cultural changes, encouraging women to participate more equally in society without fear of judgment or social exclusion based on perceived breaches of honor. While legal reforms can promote gender equality, societal norms may be slower to change, and in some communities there may be resistance, particularly if the doctrine has been deeply entrenched in tradition. Nevertheless, the elimination of honor based on restriction can also provide women with greater access to education, employment, and public life, areas historically limited by the traditional view of women's roles. The removal of the Women's Honor Doctrine can also have significant effects on family dynamics. In societies where women's behavior is tied to family honor, this shift can challenge traditional gender roles, allowing men and women to interact in more egalitarian ways and share responsibilities and decision-making power. However, this change may also create tension within families, particularly among older generations who cling to traditional views. Younger women, in contrast, may feel empowered by the change, which could lead to generational divides. Politically, the abandonment of the Women's Honor Doctrine can symbolize broader legal reforms aimed at improving women's rights. It may lead to the criminalization of behaviors once deemed dishonorable, such as abortion, adultery, or sexual independence, and strengthen legal protections against gender-based
where the laws are violated for setting aside the woman's honor. So, our group think that there are two main state law that will be violated if we set it aside. So, number one is the Republic Act of 8353, or the Anti-Rape Law of 1997, which provides the classifications of how the incidents could be called rape. And the second one is the Republic Act of 9710, or the Magna Carta for Women, which provides protection, security, support, and assistance for those women who are abused or in the state of risks. So like the case of People versus Amarela, so the victim there was asked about how the situation happened. So the victim provided how she was raped and sexually abused. So although the court ruled out that the two accused were really guilty, the CA already doubted the confession of the victim because her testimony clearly provides that her confessions are not really true, but therefore still the court really sided with her. And then since the court really thinks that if we set aside the women's honor doctrine, this provides the fairly justice towards the accused, because if they did not set it aside, it would be unfair for those accused that maybe the accused were really not guilty at all. But if we think it that way, that if we set it aside, this could prevent women for attaining their justice that they can receive if they are really a victim of rape. And especially if we set it aside, our group thinks that majority will be neglected. The cases of rape will be neglected, and the women could not fight for their rights at all. So,
setting aside the Women's Honor Doctrine is a huge step towards the protection of the rights of Filipino women, especially from any forms of abuse or sexual abuse. As we all know, the Maria Clara Doctrine presumes that Filipino women would not admit to being abused unless the abuse had actually occurred. So this doctrine that was introduced in our country first in 1960 had a lot of effects, particularly negative ones, in the rights of women here in our country. So the first effect, negative effect should I say, is it restricted their human rights on receiving protection and security, especially in gender-based violence to which involves sexual abuse. And another significant effect of this doctrine in the rights of women here in our country is it created a higher burden of proof for women who were victims of abuse. Of course, their testimony was often scrutinized more closely than all of the male victims, and they were often required to provide additional evidence to corroborate their claims. And the third and the last one that I can give is it actually discouraged women from reporting abuse. Knowing that their credibility would be questioned, many women who actually suffered from any forms of sexual abuse chose to remain silent about the abuse that they had suffered. So fortunately for all of us, the Supreme Court of the Philippines removed the said doctrine in 2018.
So I'm Daryl and I'm the part of the group that tackles the topic about the setting aside of women honors doctrine. And my part is what is the solution and the movement of this reform. So the first one is the solution. So the solution proposed by the Supreme Court in revising the Women's Honor Doctrine centers on dismantling long-standing stereotypes embedded in legal proceeding regarding sexual assault cases. Historically, the doctrine relied on the presumption that woman's modesty and moral integrity should automatically validate her testimony, rooted in the idealized Maria Clara image. However, this approach often resulted in unfair trials as it assessed on women's credibility based on archaic gender expectation rather than objective facts. In the People v. Amarela case, the Supreme Court recognized that continuing to enforce these stereotypes perpetuates gender biases that undermine both justice and the dignity of women. The court's solution is to transition toward a more impartial assessment framework where a victim's testimony is evaluated within the full context of corroborative evidence without dependence on gendered assumptions. This move signals a commitment to a fairer, more balanced judicial system that respects the complexities of each case and strives to protect individuals against unjust biases. Through this approach, the courts uphold equality, ensuring that each case is evaluated with sensitivity and a commitment to modern standards of justice. So this transformative approach reflects on ongoing movements to modernize Philippine judicial practices, encouraging more progressive and evidence-based evaluation that respect individuals' rights. So that's for the solution, and the next one is the movement. So the movement to reform the Women's Honor Doctrine in the Philippines aims to reshape the legal landscape by challenging stereotypes that have traditionally influenced court assessments of women's credibility, particularly in sexual assault case. Historically, this doctrine relied on the presumption that a woman's testimony was more credible if she adhered to qualities associated with the Maria Clara archetype attributes like modesty, innocence, and submission. The modern movement opposes this outdated model, pushing for a judicial approach grounded in fairness, individual dignity, and gender equality. It advocates for case-by-case analysis based on objective evidence rather than assumption about how credible women should behave. In recent years, this movement has gained momentum with legal scholars, advocates, and courts emphasizing the need to eliminate implicit biases and thus justice system that disadvantage women. By promoting these reforms, the movement seeks to ensure that each person's testimony is respected and judged on merit, thus aligning legal practices with contemporary values of equality and human rights.